Chapter 9. The Underground. I was now willing to help, but thinking about the task ahead made my heart race. I put on a strong face, but my stomach was full of butterflies. I looked out of the corner of my eye and saw Seth silently studying me, attempting to find a trace of weakness lurking below the surface of my resolve. I put on a strong face and, satisfied, he ended his private investigation. I sighed. Everything had happened so fast, and it took me a few moments for my mind to catch up. We rode in silence for several hours, so I had plenty of time to think about the situation. I would help, because I felt it was the right thing to do. But that wasn't the only reason I was going along with this. I wanted the opportunity to find out what I could about my brother and his disappearance. I leaned my head against the window and watched the trees race by. Lude was beautiful, so I didn't lack for entertainment in the form of scenery. Gargantuan mountains, their tips covered in a light dusting of snow, cut into the sky. Large swaths of dense, evergreen forests blanketed the landscape. Part of me wanted to open the car door and bound naked into the wilderness to escape from it all. A simple life is all I ever really wanted anyway. The driver, John, pulled off of the paved road onto a more primitive one. It must be rarely used as several branches slapped at the windshield, and I felt every stone on the road as the car struggled down the path. Eventually, the car came to a halt in a cozy clearing where the road stopped. The four of us exited the vehicle. The sunlight barely penetrated through the ceiling of branches and foliage above us. We were deep in the forest and far from the modern comforts and prying eyes of civilization.
Open the trunk,
Diane motioned. I trudged through the thick carpet of pine needles to the trunk and did as commanded. Popping open the trunk, I found a muddy green and brown tarp.
Give it here. Help me cover the car,
Diane said. Diane and I, with no help from John or Seth, covered the car. Seth simply stared. John stuffed and lit a pipe, puffing contentedly as the two women worked. Diane and I anchored the tarp to the ground, with tent stakes, and backed up to judge our work. The stately limousine now blended seamlessly in with the undergrowth. You'd have to be looking expressly for a hidden car in order to spot it. John wandered away from our group and pulled down some vines and branches.
This way,
He beckoned. We plodded single file down the wooded trail. The footpath twisted deeper and deeper into the forest, taking us both uphill and back downhill. Fallen logs dotted with white mushrooms occasionally blocked the path. John, Diane, and I clawed our way over them, whereas Seth was able to hop over the rotting roadblocks with ease. Thankfully, it was a reasonably short walk. We came to a small cave dipping into the earth. I could hear the sputter of an underground stream somewhere in the darkness of the mysterious depths. I craned my neck upwards and squinted to see through the treetops. I recognized where we were. We were at the foot of a somewhat notable mountain, Mount Tidin. It wasn't the largest mountain in the area, but a freak landslide 100 years ago revealed its unique geology. Where the dull, rocky skin of the mountain fell away, a streak of red sandstone appeared. It looked as if the mountain had a bloody slash across its face. I stared at the entrance into the earth, feeling a little afraid and a little excited. The cave in front of us would lead directly into the heart of the mountain. We made our way into the inky blackness of the cavern. I couldn't see anything past the entrance, and we didn't have any flashlights.
Watch this,
Diane said, nudging me with her shoulder. She snapped her fingers 3 times and the cave illuminated itself. The ceilings of the tunnels and caverns were strung with electric lights.
Fancy, right?
She bragged. I faked a smile and nodded. More strange than impressive, I thought. Seth rudely shouldered his way to the front of the group. I didn't let it bother me. I was too distracted by the cave's splendor. Slick spires clung to the ceiling and their sisters sprung forth from the ground, reaching out for each other. I had a soft spot for caves. The tight spaces make some people shudder, But my brother and I went caving with our parents before they both died in a car accident. A strange family hobby, to be sure, but an enjoyable one nonetheless. Exploring caves could be dangerous, and it wasn't uncommon for people to perish while on an expedition, but my family wasn't exactly normal. Trailing behind the trio, I craned my neck to get a look at Seth. I gritted my teeth and stared daggers at his back. If only they were real daggers. This person took my friends from me, and now I had to work with him. I took a deep, silent breath. I was doing this for a chance to get more information on what may have happened to my brother. If I had to work with this group, it was important that I made an effort to blend in. I needed to hide how much I hated Seth and how much I wanted vengeance. My survival might depend on it. I needed to break the silence, so I slipped past Diane and John and fell into place behind Seth. Trying to sound sincere, I slowly and awkwardly stammered.
Thank you for including me in such an important mission. I'll try to...
Quiet.
Seth scolded.
We're stopping soon.
I slowed my pace and fell back in behind John. Maybe Seth deduced my true aim of attempting to start a conversation. I wish I hadn't said anything. We reached a turn in the cave and everyone stopped. I, however, did not stop fast enough and slammed into John's back.
Sorry.
I apologized. John smiled courteously and put a finger to his lips, politely asking for silence. Seth crouched on the ground near a stalagmite and looked it over. He scowled and moved to another and then another. Diane poked me roughly in the ribs and whispered,
He always forgets which one it is.
I looked over at her and silently mouthed.
What?
Finally, Seth examined one more closely than the others. He rapped his knuckles on it a few times and ran his hand over it. He grabbed the tip and quickly pulled it toward him. I heard a sharp snap. He'd broken it and revealed a large red button in the core of the formation. I started to step forward for a closer look, but Diane grabbed me and held me back. Seth slammed the button with his fist. A loud whooshing sound followed, and a mass of spears with gleaming tips flew out of the wall above, below, behind, and in front of Seth. I yelped and shut my eyes, not wanting to see the bloody aftermath of Seth's mangled and impaled body. I had my eyes shut tight until I heard John chuckle softly. How could he be laughing at the death of his ally? Were these strange people that heartless?
And this is why we need Seth's reflexes.
John disclosed. I cracked one eye open and saw Seth suspended like a contortionist between several of the spears. He didn't have a scratch on him. I started to see the humor in the fact that he was never in any danger. A grin crept across my face. He probably ended up like this on every visit to their headquarters.
Every team has their own secret entrance to the headquarters. This is ours.
John explained.
This is to prevent him from coming here alone without us.
John gestured to himself and Diane.
The spears make it impossible for him to reach the button a second time to open the way to our headquarters, but never put him in danger if he makes an effort to dodge them.
Revealed Diane. It was a good idea, I thought. I had seen the damage Seth could do alone. I had already figured that Diane and John did trust Seth, but it would be foolish to leave the headquarters fully exposed. If he ever decided to turn on his allies, the result would be bloody. John, careful not to dirty his suit, bent down and pressed the button a second time. The metal spears holding Seth in place retracted, and a loud, grinding noise began to reverberate throughout the tunnel. Turning on my heels, I witnessed a large chunk of the tunnel wall slowly move to the side. Behind it was another smaller tunnel that was too tight to walk through. I peered down it, but the darkness prevented me from seeing much. Puzzled, I ran my hands along the smooth metal entrance to the strange tunnel. I glanced back at my companions, awaiting an explanation. However, Seth took it upon himself to educate me. Seth pushed me into the tube head first with his heel.
Move!
He exclaimed. I yelped as my chin struck the tube, and I began to slide quickly down into the belly of the mountain.
Was that really necessary?
I heard Diane say as I plummeted downward. I held my head off the slide to avoid breaking any teeth, and after enduring several twists and turns, I saw a circle of light ahead of me. I approached it at breakneck speed, and upon reaching it, spilled out onto a cushioned floor. I staggered off the area onto which I fell and took in what was in front of me. I had fallen into an enormous open area inside the mountain. It was almost like a deep pit or stadium that had a stone lid placed on top. The ceiling itself was almost out of sight. This large area was ringed by walkways and halls that led out of the open pit-like area and into more confined spaces in the mountain. Several people around me were bustling about in a great hurry, as if late for a series of important meetings. They took no notice of the obviously frazzled woman who fell from a tube.
Women falling from the sky must be an everyday occurrence around here,
I grumbled to myself. A few seconds later, Seth, Diane, and John came down the tube as well, but much more gracefully than I had. Without so much as straightening his tie, John strolled forward into the action and touched a large, bearded man on the shoulder. The two men shook hands and walked back toward us. Solemn-faced, he nodded.
Diane. Seth.
They, in turn, nodded back. He then locked his gaze onto me, and his face softened.
And who's this young lady?
Embarrassed, I straightened my disheveled clothing and stuck out my hand.
My name's Aubrey Rosid,
I murmured. His rough hand engulfed mine and shook it heartily.
Name's Daniel Bauman. I'm the head of engineering at this hole in the ground.
He guffawed.
What do you think?
He gestured to the facility. I was stunned at the sheer size of the underground bunker and the number of people working in it.
It's very big,
I sputtered.
You're darn right it is.
Daniel boomed, satisfied with my answer. He placed one of his big hands on my shoulder and guided me into the pit.
Well, I suppose it's time for a rundown of our history. Along with my other duties, it usually falls to me to assist newcomers to our movement.
He sniffed. He motioned with his thumb and said,
Come on, let's take a walk.
Diane waved enthusiastically as I left with Daniel. She, John, and Seth moved on together to sort out some business while I received a tour and history lesson from Daniel. Daniel, after you looked past his rough appearance, was a very kind and charming man. Walking through the underground headquarters, he pointed out areas such as weapons development, food stores, mess halls, and the hangar where planes and jets were kept. During his official tour, he also sprinkled in details about his personal life and family. The family he had to leave behind, that is. The organization he was now a part of had watched him and selected him for their team.
I had been an engineer for the military in my country, Sisla, and I was the best in my field.
He bragged. So this place has people from different countries working for it, not just people from Lude, I thought. Sisla was the country to the south of Lude. We hadn't had a conflict with them for hundreds of years. The governments of Lude and Sisla weren't exactly friends or allies, but they were trading partners. Sisla was almost twice the size of Lude, and their country was covered in rivers that led to the ocean. Landlocked Lude had a hunger for their fish and whale meat, while Sisla desired our country's lumber. The partnership was fruitful for both nations, so there was no reason to quarrel. It wasn't strange to have people immigrate from one country to another, but a foreigner cannot join another country's military. Despite being located within the borders of Lude, this place must operate independently of any single nation. Daniel continued on with his story.
A representative from the organization caught me one night, when I was coming home late from work, because of an urgent project that needed to be completed. I had worked through my only son's birthday, and was looking forward to spending the rest of the night with him. I was all set to give him a model airplane.
He sighed.
But they came to me before I got to my front door.
He said darkly. My eyes widened and I touched my hand to my face.
A black car pulled up, and a man in the back rolled down the dark windows. I couldn't see his face, but I could hear his voice. He said he had a job for me, a job that would make a difference.
he explained.
I'd always been a fan of spy novels, and here was this guy offering me some sort of super secret job. I was intrigued.
Daniel admitted.
It was my kid's birthday, so I offered the man my business card and asked for him to call me the next day.
Daniel's eyes darkened. I could tell it was causing him pain to retell the events, but he continued.
He told me the real job, probably something similar to what Diane or John told you. He also told me I had to accept or decline right then. There would not be a second meeting. I agreed out of a desire to protect my family and others.
He sighed.
I put the model airplane for my son on the doorstep, but officially, I never made it home that night. I got in the black car, and the organization's people wrecked my car and faked my death.
He finished.
Daniel.
I whispered. Daniel resumed his cheery tone.
Long story short, I'm here making the world a safer place for my son who would be
He paused and thought for a moment.
41 years old.
He smiled sadly.
But that was 30 years ago. I think I look pretty good to be in my 60s, eh?
He joked, in spite of the gloom pervading his life story. I forced a thin smile. He seemed to be happy with his decision, and I know there are people out there willing to make sacrifices for the greater good. Despite that, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than what he was telling me. We continued walking through the facility. The gargantuan underground base dwarfed anything else I had ever seen. Tunnels led to more rooms, and rooms led to more tunnels. There were areas where workers could relax and read, places where people could train or lift weights, and massive rooms full of people examining maps, having discussions, and taking notes. When Daniel finally paused to take a breath, I jumped at the chance to ask a few questions.
I still don't understand how any of this is possible.
I stated, gesturing at the base nestled in the guts of a mountain,
And no one would blame you.
said Daniel, guiding me forward.
But as an engineer, you can trust me when I say that, with enough money and time, building anything is possible. It wasn't always like this. Hundreds of years ago, the organization started out in a rickety wooden shack in the middle of nowhere. The founder and his team were basically glorified bodyguards for men and women who were deemed to be forces of good for the world.
Daniel explained. He looked down at me and raised an eyebrow.
You probably already figured out that we don't work for Lud or any other country.
I nodded.
I knew you were sharp.
Daniel guffawed, slapping me hard on the back.
We have investors from all over the world. All sorts of people are interested in a stable world, and they bankroll this operation. Over the years, it grew larger and larger.
Daniel gestured at our surroundings, mirroring my earlier gesture.
Time plus money equals this.
During Daniel's explanation, we had arrived at an arched cavern opening, where several men and women in white lab coats were scurrying about. I immediately noticed the shelves that were carved out of the cavern walls housing rows and rows of gleaming bottles. Oh no, I thought. I know what this is,
The best part of working here is the free health care.
Daniel bragged. I forced a wry smile.
Do I have to?
I choked,
All of it is top of the line.
Daniel assured.
Come on, let's get you checked out.
He ushered me forward. All I could think about was how much I hated needles. As we entered, several of the men stopped to greet Daniel. It was clear he was well liked around here. Daniel guided me to one of those exam tables that could be found in any doctor's office, except that the bottom was crafted from, and still connected to, the stone floor.
They're usually pretty quick. Do you want me to wait with you?
He asked. I nodded.
Sure.
Truth be told, I didn't want to be alone when they came to poke and prod me. Before long, a mousy woman in scrubs and a white doctor's lab coat fluttered over to us.
Good afternoon.
She said impassively without looking up from her clipboard.
Hey there, Doc.
Greeted Daniel. When she heard his voice, she looked over her clipboard and beamed,
We've got some fresh blood for you.
said Daniel.
This is Aubrey Rosid.
I guess he knew I'd have to introduce myself a lot, so he was saving me the trouble this time.
Hello.
I chirped.
And this is the wonderful Dr. Tabitha Galen.
He announced. Dr. Galen's cheeks flushed.
Please, no need to be so loud.
She chastised. I could tell she wasn't really upset, just embarrassed. She turned to me.
You're new here, so we need to get you checked out. Nothing out of the ordinary, just a standard physical and a blood sample.
Dr. Galen explained. The color drained from my face when I heard her say blood sample. It had been years since I had to be pricked with a needle. Dr. Galen must have seen my change in appearance.
It's all standard procedure, nothing to be concerned about,
She assured. She took a step toward me, brandishing 2 giant syringes.
Now stick out your arm.
She ordered. I leapt backward.
Are you crazy?
I shouted. She and Daniel both laughed.
I'm kidding.
She said with a giggle. She put away the 2 comically oversized syringes and produced a more normal, yet still huge, in my opinion, syringe from the pocket of her lab coat. I hesitantly stuck out my arm and turned my head to the side. Dr. Galen quickly jabbed a vein and the needle hungrily slurped the blood from my arm.
All done.
Said Dr. Galen, pressing a cotton ball to the tiny hole in my arm.
See? That wasn't so bad. We'll run a few tests to make sure you're healthy.
She hurried off with the vial of my blood and disappeared amongst the other white coats fluttering about. I thought my days of having my blood stolen were behind me. I'll never get used to it. Dr. Galen wasn't gone for a minute before another doctor stepped in to perform a physical examination. He took my vitals, tested my reflexes, and asked me a few questions about my general health and diet. Dr. Galen soon reappeared.
You're as healthy as a horse.
She cheered.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
I thanked her and the other doctor before Daniel and I left the way we came and resumed the tour. Keeping my gaze straight ahead, I asked,
When did Seth come here? What's his story?
Daniel continued walking by my side, but he didn't speak for almost a full minute.
Nobody really knows.
He started.
He came here as an infant whose umbilical cord had just been cut. That was about 25 years ago, and I was still pretty new here. He was brought here by Diane and was more or less raised by her and John.
He said. He clenched his teeth.
Well, I suppose trained is a better word than raised.
He winced. If that was true, Seth and I are about the same age, I thought.
Daniel.
I grabbed his arm.
What else do you know? When exactly was he brought here?
I questioned. Daniel looked puzzled.
If memory serves, I'd say October 13th at around 2 in the morning. He was a fresh kid, so he was probably born around midnight. Pretty weird, don't you think?
He puzzled. I froze. My mother always told me I was special for being born at midnight when the day rolled over to October the 13th. Daniel saw my reaction.
Everything okay?
He asked.
Yes, of course.
I nodded.
Still just a bit overwhelmed at seeing this place.
I lied. Daniel knew I was lying, but he didn't press me any further. We had gone in a loop around the better part of the base and met back up with Diane, John, and Seth.
Well, if you lot want to get to your destination in one piece, I better go have a look at your transport.
Daniel yawned. He left to make sure our ride to the mission would be ready.
It was a pleasure to meet you, Rosid.
Daniel waved.
Likewise.
I shouted after him. Our mismatched group reassembled. We walked to a windowed watchtower in the middle of the pit. At the bottom of the spire was a set of iron stairs guarded by 2 armed men. Diane and John each flashed an insignia, and the 2 guards stepped aside to allow our passage. We hiked up the stairs until we reached a well-lit room with windows instead of walls, which would give the occupant a clear view of the goings-on of the base. The room was covered with maps and charts with colored pins stuck in them. At the back of the room, farthest from the door, sat a stately oaken desk. A tall leather chair with its back to us obscured its occupant.
Ms. Rosid,
A voice said.
you are a very interesting young woman, impersonating a soldier, and even going toe-to-toe with our own Seth and living to see the sunrise.
My face flushed. but not because I was embarrassed or flattered. I felt angry. His words made me out to be a great fighter when, in reality, Seth spared me on a whim after killing my comrades. The chair spun around and the man revealed himself. He was a handsome, clean-cut man with professionally styled brown hair. He stood, revealing himself to be heavily muscled. This was no desk jockey. The man continued.
So interesting, in fact, that I wanted to personally welcome you to the party.
He outstretched his arms.
Miss Rosid, welcome to the Underground.